Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we have a Beretta Silver Pigeon pump action shotgun. These were pretty popular around 60s, 70s, 80s. And this one has come in because the owner wants to have this reblued, just the receiver. So not the barrel. And it's kind of hard to get old bluing and new bluing to match. So on this variation, we are going to see if we can strip this off, do a slow rust blue of building it back up, and then seeing if we can do a combination of chemicals to kind of put a wear or patina look to a new bluing finish to get it to match this barrel here. So typically what you would do is you would strip everything that's metal and reblue it all at once. But this customer has very limited finances to what he wants to do to this, but he still wants to keep it looking good. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to strip this all down. We'll lay all the parts out, and then I'll come back in and show you a plan on how we're going to chemically strip this bluing off without sanding, because there's all little fine detail in here, and then how we're going to slowly rust blue this back up. All right, so let me strip this down. We'll get all the parts put out in front of us, and we'll start from there. All right, so everything's tore apart, and what a pain in the ass. I'm actually going to do a separate video on how to take these apart and put them back together again. I have all the wood stripped off, all the metal, and we have a couple other little gremlins that we found, and this is why we take everything fully apart, because you never know what you're going to find. We had a pretty significant crack right through the center, so we're going to glass that back together and squeeze it, get that to dry. And the buttstock has a significant chunk taken out of the back here. And looking at the wood grain, I don't know if you can pick this up, but the grain on the wood goes circular this way. It doesn't come straight through like you would see in this variation here, which there's also a crack right through here. So in order to repair this big chunk out, we're going to have to cut this section and take it off and put another section on and then sand it all down to match. The crack does not go all the way through the front face, but we're going to have to replicate this so that it mates up to the back of the receiver. So this is going to be definitely an interesting piece to go, but this all needs to get cut straight off, another piece put on, and then sanded to match. So that's going to take a lot of time. But all these little cracks through here, they go straight through because of how hollow that is back here. This wood is just so dry that we're going to end up stripping and redoing all of this in order for this buttstock to survive. I took a look online to see if I could find a replacement stock. I always do that first. No, there's really nothing out there. So given that this is the original piece, we will redo this. Even if we did find a replica, it would be hundreds of dollars. So let's teach you guys how to save the money there. Always keep donor wood around, cut and replace. So the plan for bluing all of this is we're going to do it all, because underneath there's wear in this barrel here, and if we left that alone, this would eventually rust. See if we can pick it up here. But the bluing is worn from the handguard right along the bottom piece there. We can't leave that. So if we're rebluing something, we might as well do it all at once. What's the difference between one little piece or all of it? So I'm going to take this pin out. This is captured. So we just push that pin out, take this off, and we are going to use Evaporust and another small little couple drops of a chemical that I use for stripping brass. Put it in there. Only let it sit for 2 or 3 hours. Take it off, dry it off with water, or wash it off with water, and then use steel wool and see if that bluing just comes right off. If we let this sit for hours and hours in that solution, it will pit this metal. Then we're sitting here with sand, paper, and everything else to try to get those pits out. So we're going to do just a little bit of that evaporust for an hour, and then we'll take it off, wash it with water, and come at it with some steel wool and see what it looks like. You can also use a carding wheel. Remember when we boil and conserve these parts, we use that carding wheel to brush off. You can use the carding wheel on this to see if it just peels off that little bit of bluing. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to let these soak in a little bit of a bath of this stuff, and we'll come back in an hour and see what it looks like. At the same time, I'm going to take this bolt apart and clean it. I'm not going to put it in an ultrasonic cleaner, just because if you left this thing put together and did that, all the gunk would still be in there. So I'm going to take it apart completely and clean all the little nooks and crannies in there. And that is a much better way than just dumping this thing into an ultrasonic cleaner. If this was caked on type carbon, okay, I could say use that, but we're not going to at this time. We're going to do our due diligence, use our little tools and the tools that we have here right here, and get this stuff cleaned inside. Same thing with the trigger mechanism. It's not too bad, but we're going to get all our little Q-tips in there. I'm not going to fully disassemble this. I'm just going to clean it around the outside, because down inside really isn't that bad. And all these little parts and these little springs are quite annoying. And it's really not that bad. This is aluminum though, so I can't blue that. Unfortunately, that's going to stay the way that it looks right there. There's just not much we can do besides you'd have to re-anodize this, and I don't have the tools to do that, nor am I looking to get into it. So that's the plan. We're going to soak. I'm going to acrid glass up this handguard real quick. That'll be a later piece that we dive into, but let's get everything blued up and get that stuff done. So when I come back, this will be out of the bath. All these parts will be cleaned, and we're going to get prepped for rust bluing. All right, we're back from out of the tank with the evaporust, and it strips the bluing off perfectly. There's no sanding that's going on here. This is what it looks like coming out of that tank, and it's only been in there about an hour. And then all I do is just take a little steel wool and wipe it over the top. So all that bluing comes right off. There's nothing left. So we just got to clean the inside, get all the gunk and everything out, which you could also boil right after doing this. But what I've done right now is I've taken some 400 grit sandpaper, because this side was heavily scratched around these circles. Someone took a punch and was trying to really, I guess, dig those pins out of there. So I started to sand that down, and I'll work through the grits, go from 400 to 600 to 800 to 1,000 to 2,000. And polish this sucker all the way back down. So I'm going to have to do this other side as well, because there is some light scuffs, like right around there. So that won't need 400 on this side. We'll start at 600 and work our way back up. Just want to be careful not to erode the edges where it has all that nice little scroll work done. We're going to try to avoid that. The top part we'll do with just 1,000 grit, and then go to 2,000, because there's no scratches, but we just want to take some of the old spotty marks that are on here. Most of it's just from some surface rust, but we're just going to take that off. We'll do a little bit around the bottom here with the 1,000 and the 2,000, and we'll get everything nice and uniform. The barrel I'll probably just do some 2,000 grit on, just to make it smooth, so that when we do re-blue this, it'll match. Now when you have little bead sights like this, you should unscrew them. Take them off when you blue. And then we'll make sure that that gets screwed back in and secured properly. But the threads are all good on this. It's a really nice shotgun. So I'm going to start with the sandings, and then I'll bring you back in so you can see what it's done. This is going to take a while. It's going to take hours to do. Use wooden blocks. Don't just do it with your hand. So I have these barrel blocks, and they're perfect. They're nice and flat. And you can use something like this to wrap your sandpaper around and just go back over with, so you don't round off edges. But take your time. Do not go fast with sanding. It takes forever. It's a labor of love. So put something on, get some music on, and just keep going back and forth and build those layers up from 400 on upward. I wouldn't go below 400 unless you got some serious pitting, but this is just light surface scratches. Because if you go below that, you're going to really take away your scroll work that's in here and all your markings. So I'm just going over certain areas until I can really blend these scratches away and then work my way up from there. So we'll come back here in a couple hours and we'll see how everything looks after it's been sanded. All right, so now we got things sanded. It took about 2.5 hours to get where I want it to be. It's not pitch perfect beautiful, but this gun is not meant to be that way. So what we got is a nice shine on the receiver, but not as detailed on the magazine tube because I want this to be more of a matte finish. This will come out with the shine like it's supposed to have. And then we got as many of the deep scratches out that we could get. So this is not polished. So if I wanted this to be mirror pitch perfect like new, I would wet sand this like crazy and spend another 2 hours and probably have a machine that would go over this. But this is all by hand. There's a couple deep scratches that are still one right across there, but in order to get that out, I would have to sit here with a little small rotary polish to try to do that. We're not going to spend that time and that money on this one for this customer. We're just going to get the big deep ones out that we could, at least get them down so they're not as noticeable. Because again, we're going to rust blue this thing here, and it's going to, I want it to look somewhat worn. I don't want this thing to look brandy new because the gun is not new. It's not supposed to look like that. So the barrel, all the markings came out nice. All this stuff is polished as good as we want it to be for rust bluing. So we took the front bead out. Everything looks great all the way around. This didn't have that many scratches in the barrel. It was mostly just here around that side of the receiver. So this is prepped. Sand-wise, I'm going to use acetone and clean these really well. And then we're going to start the prep for getting these into a humidity box for rust bluing. So we have a rust blue solution that we're going to use. You've seen me use it before. Once this is acetoned and prepped, we're going to heat this up just a little bit to about 90 degrees. I'm just going to put it in a box with a small heater in there, set to 90. Then we're going to take it out. We'll wipe on the rust blue chemical, and then we'll hang it into that humidity box with a humidifier and just let it percolate in there for about an hour to 2 hours max. As soon as we see that small rust layer form on there, that's when we take it out and we boil it to convert it. And then we'll go through those processes maybe 2 or 3 more times till we get that desired depth. So we'll prep all this stuff now and we'll come back in as this is about to go into the humidity box. So I've turned off our little humidifier that's down there, and let's see how these things have created a nice little coating of rust on them and what they should look like before we boil them over. So I'll lay it down on here. So this is what you should see. It's like little brown fuzz that's kind of on everything. It should have that kind of look to it. Now you could leave it in here for longer and get it a little deeper, but I want to see how this comes out on this particular metal. So I got there's different spots in different areas, and that's okay. And when we boil this and it comes out, it should look all different colors, almost like rainbowy a little bit. That's okay, because then we're going to cart all that stuff off. Let's see how this guy looks. Yeah, so we got a pretty even coating of this rust on top of our solution all the way through. So let's boil this and see what it looks like right after it comes out of the boiling pot. And then we'll take some steel wool and try to remove some of this junk here. It should be like black soot that comes off, and we should see a bluing starting to form underneath. This will probably take another 2 or 3 passes maybe to really get it where we want it to be. So let's start the boiling and we'll come back right after. All right, so here we are out of the pot. We've been steaming, and this is the first pass. So let's Get you in here so you can see. It just looks like soot, black soot all over everything. And if we take our little bit of steel wool and start to scrape off, let's see what it looks like underneath. And it's just, this gunk just comes right off. But we got bluing, or at least a darker color than what we had before. So now the best thing to do is take this to a carding wheel and get this all off nice and evenly. But let's just do this tube here, and then you can see the color that's underneath. And this is obviously going to need another pass. This is just the first pass of doing it. But all this stuff just flakes right off. And it is literal dust. And if it looks a little streaky, that's fine, because remember, this is just the first pass. We're going to have to do this again, and it will darken it all up. And sometimes in between, I'll take just a little 2000 grit sandpaper, because if there's mineral spots or something on here, it'll even that out. This is what we're getting. It's a nice darker color. So I'm going to take this up to a carding wheel. I'm going to cart all this stuff off. Actually, let's see what this side looks like. This side has a little less spottiness to it. See, nice bluing is starting to appear there. So let's wire wheel this all. I'll show you what it looks like after it's been wire wheeled. And any place where there's a little bit of extra drop like this, I'm going to hit it with the light sandpaper, and then we're going to re-acetone to clean off anything that might be there, and reapply another coat, and go back into the humidity box and do another trip. So I'll show you after this is all wire wheeled. All right, here's everything after it's been wire wheeled off. It's not as dark as I want it to be, but we're starting to get there. What probably happened here is I probably didn't wait for the rust to get on there enough, meaning it didn't permeate into the metal as much. It's not bright and shiny. It's definitely a darker hue. Not as dark as we want, but it's a start. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat this metal up next to a heater. I'm going to let it get to about 90 degrees surface temperature. Then I'll put my bluing solution on and put it back into the steam box. Problem is, here right now it's pretty cold out, and this room that I have usually stays about 80 degrees, but with heaters running, it's a dry heat, so there's really not a lot of humidity in the air. Yes, our steam box is supposed to give us that humidity, but it's kind of 50-50. It can take a lot of that, a lot more time to do this in this kind of temperature. So we're definitely getting there. It's probably going to take maybe 3 passes to get what we want, but we're going to try a different strategy here to try to permeate this rust a little deeper in there before we take it out and boil again. All right, here we go. I'll come back to you guys after we take it out for the second time. All right, while this other barrel and action are doing another pass through the steam box, I have this all sanded. This is down 220 back up to 600 grit. I have everything where I want it to be, but as we can see where everything was blown out here, we want to cut this piece off, and we have our donor piece of wood here that we're going to put on. So I got to find the best way. I'll probably split the top of this down this way and line that up. So we'll prep the bottom and we'll cut it, and then I'm going to put a pin down through here that sticks proud off of this way and make a little dimple on this side and press that down in and then squeeze it and glue it. And then we're going to start sanding all of this wood down till it matches that. So we'll cut off the back here, and then we'll have to reshape the face of this so that it mates up with the back of the receiver. So we're going to put a donor graft in, and then we're going to whittle it down till it matches. So to spare you the sanding and the cutting and all of that stuff, I'll bring you back in once this is pretty much cut down to a rough shape, and then show you some of the tools that I use to make this angle match the back of the receiver. All right, we'll come back and do that. So we're back out of the second round of going through all of this. And you can see it's much darker on these sections here. But what I did is a comparison. I scrubbed to about here with some steel wool. I don't know if you can see the difference between where that stuff ends up. You know, that's all your black sooty rust that you've converted over that you got to scratch off to what looks like underneath. So we're still got to go back through and do this again. Some of this can take several times before you really get the darker color that you want, but I'm going to try a cheat on this just to see how this works. I did it on another piece before and it worked out pretty well. I'm going to take some cold blue, just your basic cold blue material, and I want to do the under section. I'll probably do this lug right here just to give a test of what it's going to look like, instead of doing, because we really want a shiny type blue to this, where the rust blue is going to be more of a matte finish. Now you could put oil on there, which will obviously bring out a little bit of the shine, but as the oil really soaks down in, you get that matte finish again. The cold blue has a little bit more of a shine to it, but if we don't do a lot of cold blue and just do a little bit, we're creating that plating over top of this darker matte color, and it might give us that brighter, shinier type of appeal, but without doing more and more rust bluing and then polishing on top of that. So we're going to try to cut that workload in half and do a cheat code and just put a little bit of rust blue over top of this. In theory, we have multiple layers of bluing now on this gun. So yes, cold blue is very thin. It's not really a bluing, it's just a plating color that you're putting on top of the metal. But rust bluing is permeating down into the metal, giving us that dark color and that protection that we're looking for. So let's see if we can combine these two together to make a decent looking finish at a very cheap and inexpensive way to refinish your gun. Remember, this is not a big professional hot bluing operation that we're doing where we're bringing these things back to new. This is just something that you guys can do as a trick or a hack on some of your old stuff at home. That's a very inexpensive way to preserve it. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. We're not trying to make things old new again. We're just trying to preserve and keep things going on for the long run. So the base coat is rust bluing, and then we'll try to do a little bit of cold bluing on top to get that richer, shinier type of look. So I want to show you what this looks like when we scratch this off. So this is obviously pretty sooty and pretty dirty. We have that converted rust on top. And when we use a carding wheel, obviously we get a little bit of a better result. But as you can see, hopefully you can see, it's a little bit darker. It's kind of like those scratch-off lottery tickets. So that finish isn't too bad underneath there. Definitely much darker. And I did the other side of this. This side's a little lighter. So it's definitely spotty with what we're getting as a result. And the magazine tube will scratch off as well. But we're going to do one more pass with rust blue. See what it looks like, if it's got a nice even dark tone to it. And then whatever's a little spotty, we're going to see if we can do that cold blue over this, if this lug turns out well. And see if we can get a more uniform look if it doesn't come out that way on the next pass. But typically what you would do is just keep doing pass after pass after pass with rust blue until you got that dark color, an even dark color like this, what that looks like. You would keep going until you got to that point. But we're going to try to cut the workload time in half by doing this process. So one more time in here, with the rust blue going through the steam box. And we'll come back and take a look at what that third pass looks like. And if we still don't have the desired look, what we're going for, we'll do that test. But I have a feeling we're going to do this one either way. I've done test pieces of metal with this combination before, and it did look really good. So that's why I'm hopeful it'll turn out on this. But before we do an entire barrel, we'll do just a portion that would typically be hidden under stuff and see how that turns out. All right, we'll be back shortly. So we did our third trip through, and it's definitely a little bit darker, but not as dark as we want. And I scrubbed everything off already for you. So you can see, let's just see, make sure that that's clean. You can try to get a look at the finish of what we're getting now. So that's a third trip through. We're still kind of uneven in the coloring, and it's not uniform all the way through. The magazine tube, not so bad, but still uneven in coloring. So now what I wanted to do is use the cold blue and just put a nice layer over here to try to bring everything up to give me a shine. So I did this lug. I don't know if this will show up well on here, but it definitely has a shine to it versus the rest of the barrel. So this is where we're going to try to achieve that hot blue look, but without getting into all the mess of doing that. It definitely is a little bit shinier, but we're going to be very uniform in the coloring. Now this is just one pass of the cold blue on here. Usually cold blue, you got to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 passes, whatever the case may be. But we have a nice dark substrate to go with. So as we go through the cold bluing, and how we're going to do this is use a little butane torch, very quickly, I guess you want to say, heat this metal up. You don't want it to be hot, and you don't want to heat it to the point where it forms the condensation on it. Just get it warm. So when you wipe the cold blue on there, it dries almost instantaneously. That's the most uniform way that I've ever done cold bluing and can get a better result, is just heat, one pass, let it dry, and then light steel wool to scrub off the crud that kind of grows from it. Dry terry cloth, no oil, remember, nothing on your hands. And then same process, very lightly heat and then wipe over one more time. And those are the coats that we're going to be doing. And we're going to build up this plating on here until our bluing is uniform and has that little bit of shine to it. Then we have to wash everything off with water. Always wash cold blue off with water immediately after you're done putting your coats and your layers on there. If you don't, that salt and sulfur, whatever chemical is in that cold blue, will rust and pit through the metal right away. You got to get it off. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to take my cotton swabs, heat this metal up real quick, and then just do passes on just the barrel. So we'll leave this for last. Let's see how the barrel looks. And if we can get the uniform coat that we're looking for, then we'll move over to the receiver and get it to match. All right, so I'll do some passes and come back and show you what the barrel looks like. All right, so I cold blued the barrel now, and this is before I've washed it off. So this is about 5, maybe 6 passes over everything. And I have a very nice, shiny, uniform look to everything. This is exactly what we're going for. It's even. This is obviously not oiled or anything like that. This is just the way that it looks after coming through everything. And I don't know if this is going to pick it up or if it's going to have a shine or a sheen where you can't see the actual bluing to it, but let's hold a direct comparison. So just rust bluing versus putting just a couple coats of cold blue over our rust blue to give us that shine. So this is something you can do to just about any other firearm that you're trying to do, meaning commercial stuff that had that shine to it. And another thing that you can do to this is after you've washed it off and you've let this sit for 24 hours, I use used motor oil to put on here because all the detergents have been cooked out of it and there is nothing in there that is an anti-rust property anymore. So you won't worry about pulling or getting swirls or anything like that where it takes your cold blue plating off. So down around the end of the barrel looks really nice. There's just a couple scratches and scuffs because I did not sand the metal on this barrel. I want to keep a lot of that stuff. There's character to this gun, and it's only new once. I can't make it new again. Even if you try, it still looks off and a little odd, in my opinion. But to each his own. I mean, this might work for you. This might not work for you. If you want to get better at rust bluing, you just have to do more passes. You have to have really good conditions, meaning it's a little cold down here right now. You have to heat your metal up before you put it in your humidity box, which I was trying to do, but the heat only holds for so long. I don't have a big professional humidity box to put it into. This is all stuff that anybody can do around your house and still have a good outcome from it. Rust blue is not expensive. That's $30 a bottle. A big bottle of cold blue is about the same. So for 60 bucks in chemicals, you can really get a good base coat and then put your shine on the outside of it. And once this is oiled up, you won't see any imperfections at all. Oil hides a lot as long as the oil is wet. And this is a great way to get a good finish back that can protect these old guns. So I'm going to do the same process on this. I'm going to heat this up and do about 5 or 6 coats till I get it to match. And then we'll reassemble everything. I'm going to do a separate video on how to assemble and disassemble this gun. I did a quick look online and there isn't any for these Silver Pigeon pump Beretta shotguns. And there's a lot of them out there. So I'll put a video after this on how to put this together and take it apart once it's all refinished and looks nice. So we'll come back after this is done and then we'll reassemble and go from there. All right, so I did the receiver and this took a little bit more passes to get this desired type of look. So I'm gonna go at an angle so you get a shine so you can still see the spots underneath. That's just what was in the metal left from sanding. So this is going to have, when it's oiled, it'll look like it kind of does here without that shine. It'll look just like that once it's oiled. This isn't washed off either. So once the oil sinks down in, you won't see a lot of that spottiness. Now the other side, definitely the top, came out really nice. It's got a shine to it, which is what we were looking for. But it's going to still have its little scratches and little scuffs here and there. And that's kind of what we're looking to keep. I don't want to get rid of all of them because that is the character. This side came out a little bit nicer. It's got a really nice shine to it, but when I get that angle, you can still see a little spotty, but not as bad. The other side was actually pretty much more of a rougher finish to try to get to look good. There was heavily scratched. So this is a lot of sanding that took just to get it to there. But again, once that oil is on there, it'll look very different. So I'm going to go wash this off, and I want this to sit for a little while before we oil it. But I'll come back and we'll oil this together so you can see what that's going to look like. And the bottom came out pretty nice too. So with the 2000 grit sandpaper, you can really get that polish and that shine to come back out. But now if this gets a scuff or a scratch, it's got that rust blue underneath. So it's going to stay protected. Where if this was just cold blue, this would definitely rust in that little spot. So there's still a little areas here that you can use your steel wool to try to even out. But what I'll end up doing is taking a microfiber cloth after this is washed and dried and just try to go over it a little bit more. If there's still some residual bluing agents and whatever that are there, we'll get that off. But once this is oiled, this is going to look really nice, but not brand new, and it won't look like someone sanded it down and hot glued it again. You want to keep a lot of that character, in my opinion. That's what I try to do. All right, so I'm going to wash this, And then we'll come back once it's dry after a few hours, let this cold blue really set, and we'll put some used motor oil on it. Take a look. All right, everything's cleaned up here. It's been washed down, it's been dried, and sat for a little while. So now what I want to do is take a little used motor oil, because once it's all burned up, a lot of the detergents are out, and anything that's going to be anti-rust is gone. And a little bit goes a long way, because the stuff is thick. It has been sitting outside where it's cold. So when we put this on, this metal is going to really soak it in, because obviously there's no oil in this metal right now. So I'm going to put a light coat on, and then probably within the next 20 minutes to a half an hour, it's going to need more, because this will look dry again. It's literally going to soak it all in. And you can do, you want to do inside, outside, everything. All the metal needs this oil on there right now. And you can't put too much. So just coat everything real nice. But what this oil does too is it'll hide a lot of the imperfections because of how thick it is. But it's also really good of how well the metal will drink this stuff in. It's really good for the metal. CLP is very light and will sit on top. Doesn't always penetrate as much as you want it to. Once you've taken everything out, this will actually do a better job. So another thing you can do is keep your old toothbrushes around. Dip your toothbrush in. And really get everything on the inside coated pretty well. Because you get all your cracks and crevices in there. And we don't want rust to reform. Now, if I had a bigger shop, what I'd do is keep a PVC pipe filled with kerosene, and I would dump this into that kerosene. That would do just as good of a job of getting oil back down into the metal. But I don't have that, and I'm not going to keep that inside. So for the practical side of things, I'll get down in those screw holes too. If you're at home, you're not going to keep something like that necessarily either. But you can have a little quart of used motor oil. Put the cap on, that can stay anywhere. So make sure you also get down into all the little lettering, scroll work. Because just by washing it, that stuff doesn't necessarily come out. So because we're a shotgun, we have the anti-glare sight line. All right, so now that that's on there, just do a thin wipe so I can show the camera here what we're looking like now. So now when we turn towards the light to get that glare, we don't see all the spots that we saw before once there was no oil on everything. All that's pretty much gone. And the more oil that we put on and the metal soaks in, the less you'll see of any of that. So now as we get the glare going, a lot of those imperfections are soaked up by the oil. But this looks fantastic now. And it doesn't look like it's brand new blued. It's got that little bit of a patina look to it, but ever so slightly. And here's another trick that I do when you have a really old gun and you want it to be preserved, but you really don't want it to look new, and we try to age things, meaning these edges right here where you have that 90-degree break, there's a way that you can just lightly buff that, and you just use a metal polish. So a metal polish like this on a microfiber cloth after you've blued before you put your used motor oil back on here, just wipe the edges. And this metal polish will actually pull that bluing just a little bit and make it look dull. Now you still have bluing on the metal so that it won't rust, because the last thing we want to do is make bare metal again. That bare metal won't be there, but it'll just be matted enough so that it looks like honest wear. And that's kind of what I like to preserve on these guns. We have to keep some of that wear. That's part of its history. You know, if you carried it your entire life as a kid or something like that, and now you're an older guy and you're just trying to preserve these things, all that wear means something to you. It's every trip that you've gone out. It's every time that you were with somebody. It means a lot. So you don't want that to necessarily go away. So keeping wear on these, I'm all for it. There's no reason to. But if you don't want to, obviously you don't need to do that step. But we're going to let this used motor oil sit in on here. I'm going to leave it soak on the inside, but I'll come back in probably an hour and put some more on. And then that'll be it. Then we can put this gun back together and store it. So for now, I would say that completes this section of the gun. And we're going to move on to the wood. So we've already cut the bad piece off. We have a new piece, donor piece, that's cut and waiting to be put on. So we'll come back and take a look at that plan and process and how we're going to do that. All right, but for now, that's the end of the metal. Now we're on to the wood part of this. So what I've done is I mixed up a little bit of Acryglass and I put my little tiny dab of brown dye into this. This is an older cup, so you see the different colors in there, but we want to try to match the wood grain a little bit. So when we have a clear dye, it doesn't stain. So we want to put a little bit of brown in there to try to match the grain lines that are coming through. So what I've done is I've put two tiny little pins, one just behind here. I don't know if you can see, there's a little bit sticking proud down in there. And we will definitely grind that down. But I want to put this glass down in there where the pins are sticking through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this at a little bit of an angle. And I'm going to run a big bead of this glass right along the top here and let it run down through. I want it to come down through and drip off this way, because if I tried to do it the other way and it ran down the inside, we got a lot more work to do. So I want that glass to come down just in between these two pieces of wood and fill that in. And then in the next couple minutes, I'll put another big bead in there and let it come through. I want to try to fill that gap. There really isn't much of a gap in between the wood. You can't see through it, but it still needs to fill. And then probably what I'll do when that dries is I'll come back this way and put a bead across the top like that. Run that bead through here and let it run down along the outside. Then we can sand everything to match and it will have filled everything underneath, because there is going to be a little bit of a gap when we come down on this side. So right under there, there'll be somewhat of a little gap. And we'll have to sand the glass away to make that match. That's the best we can do with something like this. You'll still see a line. It'll probably look something similar like it does back here where there was a crack. This is filled with glass right there. But then when we stain everything over, these grain lines do become darker. So it'll kind of blend with the rest of the lines that are in here. Now these are cracks in the wood, but I have let glass permeate down through there before I did all the sanding over here. So this is very smooth. You can't feel anything. It's just a sight line that you see. And there was another one here on this side too. It's just the grain on this wood is very wide. It's not very tight. So it is going to crack over time if you don't keep it well oiled. So I'm going to set this up in a vise right now, like in this type of angle. And then I'll start putting the bead of glass there, and I'll put some down inside that hole too. And then once it's all set, I'll grind down the little pins that are sticking proud inside. I'll grind all that stuff down. There is a chip on the bottom here, right there. So I'm going to whittle a plug that fits down into here. And once the little bit of my Acryglass gets tacky on this side, I'll level it straight, and then I'll pour a little bit in here so it will pond up on top. But then I'll have my plug with a little bit of release agent around the outside, a little bit of grease so I can take it back out and don't glue it into place. And it'll pond up right there, and then we can sand that down, try to match. It'll still be a discolored patch there, but at least it'll fill that wood so it doesn't split or crack even more. So this is the plan. That's what we're going to try to do here. We'll start with our line there, and then we'll try to fill that piece in. Once it sets, we'll come back and show you what it looks like. But the next step after that will be to start shaving this wood down. So I kept my piece that I cut off the top. This is what I'm trying to match. So I can shave everything down, but keep this same profile. I have a template right here of what I'm trying to get to and what it should look like on top. So I have something to work towards. All right, we'll come back after the glass is set and you can see what that looks like. All right, here's an update as it's kind of drying. So you can see I have it flat right now, but before I had this tilted upward more, and I laid the bead across the top here and let it run down. As it started to get tacky, I leveled this out like it is right now so that everything will kind of stay ponded right underneath the bottom there. It's not dripping, it's staying there perfectly. As this got tacky, I had a piece in here, but I was worried that it would glue itself to the rest. So I took it out and this didn't move. This is now very tacky to the touch, and it didn't run down the inside. So it's pooled right where I wanted it to, right there. And then I have glue on the inside of that hole. And we will use a little bit of a Dremel and a burr and clean up that post that's sticking down through there. But this is no longer running down through the back. It's now ponded all the way around and pooled where it should be. So it's very, I guess, sticky is the right way to call it. Right there. And we're going to let that sit, and it's going to dry just like that for about the next 3 or 4 hours. That will be a very strong bond, and then we will start to shave everything away to match the back of the receiver and to get the height right. But this is the best way to glue this thing on. We got the pins, and then we have the glass in there that will harden up. All right, once this is hardened and we come back, I'll show you different tools that I use to whittle that wood away and get the profile where it'll mate up to the receiver. So here we are, set up, ready to start working on this wood. All our glass is set, and it looks great. Everything's very strong. So the plan is we're going to use a Dremel tool for the moment, and we're going to pay attention to the grain. So let's see if we can pick up where the grain is going. It's kind of going across this way, but directly straight through, which is what we want. So I'm going to try to start at the top and work my way down. And what we're going to be using here to begin with is this little sanding bit. We're just going to take off the big, heavy chunks. We're not going to do any kind of detailed work with that. Then we're going to switch over to rasps and files to really shape where we want. And then at the end, we will use our chisel set here to really face off the lines where it matches up with the back of the receiver. And then it's on to sandpaper to get all of our detailed lines, because we do have a flat right here. So we're going to try to follow that curve going up into it. But we also need to really blend the back of where this wrist comes down. So we have really wide grain lines here, which is going to kind of look off a little bit, but again, we're repairing something that's no longer there. So it's not going to look like it wasn't there, but we're going to do our best to get the shape and the contour correct. Not so much worried about how the lines of the wood look. We just can't do that unless we got wood that exactly matched that. So we're going to start doing that. I'm going to get the Dremel and get a very basic profile going. where we're just going to take off these sides and get down to it. So once I get all that shaved, and I'm going to get this face to match the bottom here. Once I get that, we'll come back in and I'll show you what that can do. This is where your technique and your dremeling starts to show. Some of us are good at it, some of us are not, but Dremels can be used in gunsmithing just to do big chunky work like this, not fine detailed work. So I'm going to chip that away and we'll come back to see. All right, here's what it looks like after some Dremel work. So we have the overall shape that we're looking for. And now we just got to get it down to the right size. So I have my piece here that I cut off. That's my template. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take these lines that are cut in the corner. I'm going to use my chisels and I'm going to try to make them as exact as I possibly can between the height and the depth of everything, because I want to take the receiver and mate it up to the back of this and scribe a line on here as the top that I need to sand everything down to. And then we'll get it mated up to the receiver, and then I will finish sanding the rest of this contour, because I can't match this with nothing to really match up to what I'm trying to get after. So we have to just get this face cut, a little bit of a recess put into here somewhere, and as long as this can mate up to the receiver, then I can finish doing the rest of the profile. So I'm going to cut this here now, mate it, and then we'll come back and take a look at how I did it. All right, bringing you back here because there's had a boo-boo. So on our original piece of wood that was here, it's very, very dry. It's older wood because it's a grain that I could get that would be close to this. And it cracked on top. So instead of taking this all the way off because it's already glued on and it's more of a pain in the butt, we would have had to have cut below it. I added more wood to the top. And this wood is a little bit harder. So hopefully this will act as a cap to this softer wood that's below it. And there's enough glass in there that hopefully this will definitely give it some strength. So I have been whittling away. I have my flat files to try to chase the side profile, my sanding block to do the face here, and then my little chisels. So how I do this is we'll chisel down from the top just a little bit at a time, and then come in from the side and break it away. A little bit at a time, break it away. And I can take the receiver from the shotgun and put it up against here with a little oil on the back, and it makes a mark in the wood. And that's where I know I got to continue to chase, coming either down and back, down and back, down and back, until I can get this ridge to match perfectly. So this stands very proud up off the receiver, which is fine. We want to leave it like that. We just want to get this profile here to match perfectly. So when the shotgun comes up, there's no gaps, meaning that it doesn't stick off like this. Got to sand everything, chip everything down until it all matches perfectly. So we go a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time until it matches. Then we can start working on the top part here and sand it back down. I may have to put some more glass under this lip, meaning I'll lay it on its side like this, pour it down and let it run around the ridge, and then do the opposite. Turn it on this side, let it run around the ridge, and then try to sand that down. It is what it is at this point. This is very old wood, and I'm not going to find a replacement. So this just needs to work for right now, and this is a cheaper way to do it. Typically, if this cracks while we're trying to repair, you got to cut below that line and then put a bigger block on. And I just didn't really want to do that. It might be a shortcut for now, but it's also a learning curve. I'm not the best with wood. This is how we get better. This stock here is really, there's not much more we can do with it. So it's a great one to practice with and to get better with. We're not going to hurt anything by doing this. And the only thing that you would see would just be multiple lines in the glass once it's all put back together. But at least it'll be repaired. It'll work fantastically. It's going to be actually, this will be the strongest piece of the stock, as opposed to down here, which would be where it would break again should this get dropped or hit really hard, just because the grain in the wood is really wide right here. So that would be its next weakest point. So what I have left to do here is I got to take a little bit more off this face up here, use my block sander to come back, because I still have a little bit of a gap like this when I mate up the receiver. So it needs to be perfectly flush. So I'm going to take just a little bit more off of here, because there's a plate in the back that has a tongue that sticks down in here for the stock bolt to come into, and it hits it. So we just got to take it down a little bit. But you can see our glass line that's there. We would have had one straight across from our saw cut, and then another as we replaced here. So it's definitely strong. And you can see my little scribe line in the wood. That's the top of the receiver. So that's how proud I am with wood off of the top of that. So I want to leave that for now. We're going to face everything here, get it locked up and screwed back onto the gun. And then I'll whittle this down to match the profile where it meets the back of the receiver. And whatever gap I have left here, I'll just fill it back with glass, and then we'll sand it nice and flush. So I'm going to finish doing that. Once this is mated to the gun, you can come back and see how it looks from there. So I redid the glass on either side here because we had that gap, and I just took it off the back of the receiver here. We've waited about 16, 18 hours for this to harden up. We can see how everything ran down on the inside and hardened up. So we'll sand this off, cut these little tabs. And now I'm going to take my 100 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to go back and forth like this over the top. I'm still a little proud up here on this comb over here. So going up over to that is still okay. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Just trying to be careful of this flat, even though it's pretty well sanded. I'm going to come around like this and just this area with 100 grit sandpaper real slow, just wrapped around the end of my thumb because it's a good contour to go through here. And I'm just going to go back and forth like that until I can smooth this off. And then I think we're going to be ready to stain. I'm going to take some light chisels here and try to rechase some of that checkering there where it's real thin at the top. And we'll come back and take a look at it from there. So right now it's just tedious work with sandpaper, but the glass has filled all of this in. And it looks pretty even, pretty nice. So now we'll just sand it to match. And yes, we're going to have two different colors here, but unfortunately, this is the only other wood pieces I had that looked right, even though they're different. It's not the best, but the contour is right. It's shaped the right way. Everything in the face is shaped the right way. You can see with my little chisels here, the face that we had coming over this looks pretty good. So it's able to mate perfectly. And we'll just sand this stuff down so that's a nice, even, rounded lip all the way through. But again, this is just a very cheap and inexpensive way to repair wood. If you have something that's an heirloom at home and you can't find another one, like this in my case, I couldn't find another buttstock like this for this particular gun. So we'll do what we can to make it match. But it's good enough for what we want to do for the moment. All right, so I'm going to sand this, and then I'm going to mate it back up to the back side, and we'll come take a look. So the sanding is complete. It's about as good as it's going to get before taking too much material away. So I just went back and forth with 100 grit and then worked my way all the way back to about 1,000. And then did all this with 1,000. So on this side, it's very smooth to the feel. There's no lips, there's no dents, there's nothing. So now when we stain this, we'll see how this turns out. How dark that patch remains. But given the age of this gun, it's going to kind of look like oil coming back through everything. but it's very clean. It's very smooth. And this is also very, very strong. So, but it's not the prettiest. We had a spot here on the bottom that we filled. So that's all smooth. There's no lips. It's solid all the way across. There's a big chip that was taken out of there. And there was a chunk that was missing out of here. So that's all filled and sanded smooth. So now once it's stained, probably, obviously it'll match the handguard here. But this is going to be about as good as she's going to get for right now. It's repaired. There's strong wood. Kind of is what it is here, but I wish I had more wood similar to this one here that I could cut and fit onto there. But our profile is good. The shape is good. We sanded around our flats to try to keep them as preserved as possible so that when the receiver comes up, the wood isn't below the receiver line. It all sticks together. So I'm going to stain this now. I'm going to use as close of a stain to this as I can find. I got a little test piece of wood here off to the side, and we'll see if it color matches. I'll stain it, let it dry. Then I'll probably put another coat on there, let it dry, and then I'm going to wax this. I have my toilet bowl ring that I'll take some wax off of, put it on there, and then use a microfiber cloth to buff it. So we'll come back after all that's done, and then we'll mate it back up to the gun. All right, we've put a second coat of stain on and let this sit overnight. And the screw is not in the stock bolt here. It's not through the stock. So this is just loose on here. I wanted to just do another fit and make sure that we didn't have anything too proud here, metal over wood. And everything seems to line up very nicely across everything here. Everything matches and meets. This flat got a little sanded down, but it also might have shrunk. Because when you take the oil out of these around the wrist area here, sometimes the wood can contract a little bit, but not that much. So it's probably from sanding. Just trying to get everything here on top to match again. Which it does. Let's see if we can get a good profile shot. I mean, the rise to the receiver is exactly where we want it. So now this wood is strong. May not look the best with the two-tone there, but the strength is back. And if we had a solid piece of wood that was big enough to fill that whole area, then it definitely would have worked out well if it wouldn't have cracked. Actually, the wood was big enough. It just split because it was really dry. Just this wood is extremely dry too, so I'm trying to match it. So as it ages and oils again, it'll try to stay the same color, but this piece won't. It'll always be a little bit blonder, unfortunately. Unless you get more oil over the top, who knows? But again, we're not going for true perfection right here. We're just going for serviceability and bringing this thing back up. So the bluing is really good and deep and intact, and it's worn just a little bit on the edges the way that I wanted it to be, but it's still got bluing underneath there, so it won't rust, but it will match and look like it should. I mean, you don't want bright shiny brand new blue and then worn wood. To me, it just doesn't look the same. So now what we're going to do is take a little bit of this toilet bowl wax. This stuff stays good forever. This wax ring's probably 7-8 years old, and it works well for what I want it for, but we're just taking a little bit. You don't need a ton. And you can put it on your fingers, you could put it on a rag, either one. However you get it on the wood doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to take this oiled rag that I have, and we're just going to rub it into the wood. And doing this is going to help waterproof and seal everything in. But we want to make sure that our stain was dry first before doing this. And you can also buff this to like a high polish, but obviously we don't need to do that here. And it's okay if it gets on the metal too. So actually, we should take this off and do it by itself. But this is a great way to seal just about any wood that you're working on. The older the better, because if this wood was already dry to begin with, it's just going to help retain all of that, the new moisture of oil that we've put onto the wood, and stain. Cheap way to do it. These wax rings are probably like $8 still, which is not much left in the world that's $8 anymore. And you don't need to put a ton, just a decent amount that you know is going to seal everything. And it will also give the wood just a little bit of a shine too. Because once we just do stain, it kind of looks flat. And then the natural oils from cleaning the gun in your hand are going to make things shine as well. And that's going to be pretty much the end. I got to get a new butt pad for this, because this butt pad here is about as hard as a stone that you'd find outside, and is literally, if you touch it, it'll crumble apart. So we've got to find something new for it. We'll just get a replacement one and trim it down if we have to, if I can't find an original one, which that I don't think is an original one for this gun. And that'll complete this project here. So I hope you guys got something out of this. I know it may not be the best woodworking that you've seen from other people doing, but it at least teaches you the way, or a method. There's many different methods to do this. We did rust bluing. We did a full conservation of this old gun to bring it back, and then replacing of the wood. So I'm going to put it back together, and then I'm going to post another video of a disassembly on this guy, taking it all the way down and going from there. But before we leave, we try to get a comparison of the two. Yes, this is going to be a little bit darker because of the hand oils in it, but when this goes back on at the end, you know, we kind of get some resemblance to matching of the color. So from 5 feet away, it's going to look like it's all the same, which is fine. That's all we're kind of going for now. And this might naturally age over time too. But there you go. We'll put this guy back together. And then that'll be the end of that. So thanks for sticking with us while we restored this old guy, and hopefully you got something out of it. All right, take care.